Good morning, Europe. It's Friday, the 27th of May. A very warm welcome to the programme. Let's start by looking at our top stories.
The latest Russian bombing of Kharkiv leaves a trail of death and destruction in Ukraine's second city, which is back under Ukrainian control and still continues to be attacked. As the Uvalde community grieves, there are reports that the Texas school gunman, 18-year-old Salvador Ramos, entered the Robb Elementary School unobstructed. And as the Cannes Film Festival approaches its grand finale, a film documenting the harsh realities of animal cruelty becomes a hot favorite. At least 9 civilians were killed and 19 wounded after a bloody bombardment of the city of Kharkiv. Russian bombs have once again left a trail of death in Ukraine's second city, back under Ukrainian control. However, it is the opposite in the eastern regions, Donetsk and Luhansk. In the latter, the governor has said only 5% is under Ukrainian rule. Ukraine acknowledged Russian superiority in the area and claimed that Russia has the upper hand. The US government is preparing to send long-range rocket systems, but it may already be too late for these regions.
Putting pressure on Russia is literally a matter of saving lives. And every day of delay, weakness, various debates or proposals to pacify the aggressor at the expense of the victim means more killed Ukrainians. These are new threats to everyone on our continent.
Ukraine has stated that up to 8,000 soldiers have been taken prisoner by the Russians. The Ukrainian authorities hope to be able to carry out prisoner exchanges with Russia in order to reclaim them. In the Poltava region, 2 more Russian soldiers have been sentenced to prison for war crimes. Both admitted responsibility and will serve 12 years in prison. In Russian-occupied areas such as Mariupol, the Russification operation, as described by the Moscow authorities, has begun. For children, the summer holidays will be suspended in order for them to adapt to the curriculum. For adults, these trucks, which disseminate service information, drive around Mariupol to give the Russian version of the war.
In the aftermath of the horrific shooting at a school in Texas that left 19 children and 2 teachers dead, more details are emerging. There had been reports that the gunman, Salvador Ramos, encountered a school district security officer outside, but police now say the 18-year-old entered the school unobstructed.
It was reported that a school district police officer confronted the suspect that was making entry. Not accurate. He walked in unobstructed initially. So from the grandmother's house to the bar ditch to the school, into the school, he was not confronted by anybody.
President Joe Biden is due to visit Uvalde on Sunday. He's calling for Congress to pass laws tightening access to guns.
90% of gun owners support universal background checks, 84% of Republicans, and 80% of NRA members support background checks. As the president said this week, it is time to turn this pain into action. It's time for Congress to act.
The legislation before the Senate.
But despite those claims, a law Biden's Democrats intended to bring in to limit access to firearms was rejected outright by Republicans. They believe that access to guns is not to blame for this type of shooting. Their mantra is that it's people who shoot people, and point to the right to bear arms enshrined in the US Constitution. Activists hope to increase pressure on the streets and that the magnitude of this tragedy, coupled with the approaching midterms, will force some Republicans to reconsider their positions.
Sign the treaties that allow for the colony.
The Global Seven's climate and energy ministers are in Berlin for a 3-day conference to discuss the environmental crisis. Germany's Environment Minister Steffi Lemp and Economics and Climate Protection Minister Robert Habeck opened the conference on Wednesday evening. Habeck urged the G7 to lead the charge in decarbonising the transport system.
The 2 major structural crises of our time, namely global warming and the various ecological crises, especially the loss of biodiversity, are to be seen together and cannot be played off against each other, but must also be solved together. And this is also the spirit in this conference. Global warming is increasing at a dramatic rate.
The US President's climate envoy, John Kerry, joined delegates on Thursday morning. He warned participants that the climate crisis will not go away.
We cannot fall into this false narrative that because of Ukraine, there is now an excuse to have to go pump out and build an entire new generation of infrastructure. So our mission here is very, very clear in the G7 to prepare for the G7, but also for the G20, because 20 nations equal 80% of all the emissions in the world. And if those 20 nations don't step up, then we can't get the job done.
As the war in Ukraine continues, the world's leading economies have come under fire from environmental groups. They say G7 countries are at risk of sidelining their green goals in a bid to secure new sources of natural gas.
G7 energy, climate and environment ministers meet for their final day here in Berlin today as they wrangle over how to keep climate goals on track. The talks have without doubt been overshadowed by the spiralling energy costs and of course concerns over fuel supply since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which in turn has left countries like Germany, for example, which relied heavily on Russia for natural gas, scrambling to find alternatives. Now the challenge that they face is ensuring that the fallout from the war in Ukraine doesn't derail previous and current climate targets. German Climate and Economy Minister Robert Habeck said on Thursday, however, that finding alternative fossil fuels would not come at the expense of environmental goals. Instead, the energy emergency and high inflation should be, and I quote, the first step to quickly exit fossil fuel energy altogether. Before talks wrap up later today, the G7 group will also reportedly be considering committing to a phase out of coal by 2030, as well as having a net zero electricity sector by 2035. So certainly a busy and important day ahead. Kate Brady, Euronews.
Lawmakers in Slovenia have appointed Robert Golob as the country's new Prime Minister. The leader of the Liberal Green Party is replacing the right-wing nationalist head of government, Janez Janša. Golob's Freedom Movement party defeated the Slovenian Democratic Party in April's parliamentary election in a landslide victory. He says he wants to give hope back to the people.
There are three themes which illustrate our electoral coalition programme. We wish to live in a country which will offer social justice, solidarity, and which will be founded on knowledge.
The political newcomer is entering into a coalition with the Social Democrats and the left Levica party. The former business executive says improving the health system as well as curbing rising energy and food prices will be his top priorities. Meanwhile, the outgoing Premier is under fire for allegedly fuelling right-wing populism and for his habitual verbal attacks on press freedom while in office. Janša denies the allegations. Often compared to his close ally, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, he used repressive measures against the judiciary and civil organisations.
Maritime rescue charity Open Arms said it saved 110 migrants cast away in the Mediterranean under very difficult conditions earlier this week. The organisation said an overcrowded raft capsized during the rescue. The charity slammed Maltese, Italian and Tunisian authorities, saying they weren't responding to Mayday calls. A shipment of baby formula arrived in the US state of Pennsylvania from the European Union on Wednesday night. The cargo from manufacturer Nestlé is expected to help alleviate a shortage of formula in the US after a massive recall at a Michigan plant led to limited supplies. Abbott Nutrition expects to restart production on June the 4th. A Sunni mosque in Kabul was struck by a massive explosion on Wednesday, killing at least 5 people and injuring 22, according to local hospital reports. The blast was one of a series of bombings on the same day across the country that left at least 14 people dead. So far, no group has claimed responsibility.
Still much more news and analysis to come on the programme. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a few moments.